Joining us now for Word Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya, who is excited to see Ayo Mairo
Very
AC.
excited. Welcome back, Ayo.
I'm excited to see you too.
I'm so happy. Welcome. You know,
Thank you.
I'm always listening to the show on my way into the office if I'm not already in. So I picked up my phone and I saw the purple. I said, Ayo was back. So it was a huge surprise to all of us. I didn't know if you guys knew that Ayo was back, but I didn't know. So I'm very happy to see you. Welcome back.
Thank
You look
so
amazing.
Much. And you too.
How
as
are
always.
your twins?
They're doing great. I miss them.
Thank
But
God,
yeah,
already, I can
that's a
imagine.
sacrifice I had to make. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Let me tell you what's happening around the world, other than Ayo being back.
So it's only Ayo you saw here.
Sorry, oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
fine.
These people.
It's fine.
Dr. Rubin.
It's fine, don't worry. It's fine. It's fine.
Amen. Good morning, Rufai. All righty, good morning, viewers. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Now, we begin this new week with US President Donald Trump putting pressure on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky ahead of his meeting at the White House today with a group of European leaders. Now, in a post on Truth Social, Trump said that Zelensky can end the war with Russia almost immediately or continue fighting, while also ruling out Ukraine joining NATO and the retaking of Crimea, which was annexed by Russia in 2014. Now, in the coming hours, Trump will meet with European leaders, including Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, Friedrich Merz, and Zelensky himself at the Oval Office in a bid to counter a reportedly US-backed plan that would see Ukraine give up territory. Now, it is expected that Trump and Zelensky will meet privately before the other leaders do join in. Following his meeting in Anchorage, Alaska with Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed that the US and its European allies could offer Ukraine a security guarantee resembling NATO's collective defense mandate as part of an eventual deal to end this now 3.5-year war. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of demonstrators have gathered in Tel Aviv and across Israel to call for an end to the war in Gaza and the release of hostages in one of the largest demonstrations in Israel since the start of the fighting in October 2023. Now, the Hostage and Missing Families Forum, the initiator of the day of protest, estimated that about 500,000 people joined the demonstration in Tel Aviv alone. The rally on Sunday evening was the culmination of a day of nationwide protests and a general strike to pressure the government to halt the military campaign. The protests come more than a week after Israel's security cabinet approved plans to capture Gaza City, 22 months into a war that has created a dire humanitarian crisis in the Palestinian territory. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu criticized the protesters, saying their actions hardens Hamas's position, draws out the release of our hostages, but also ensures that the horrors of the 7th of October will reoccur. Those were Netanyahu's words. Those are your stories. Love to hear your thoughts before we move on to papers.
Okay, so Femi, like I predicted rightly, nothing was going to come out of that meeting. In fact, it was going to be a meeting where Trump decided to sulk up to Putin, and that was what happened. You brought out your B-2 bombers to welcome an international war criminal. That's what happened. You see, it's shocking for the world we live in that we now glorify criminals. We now glorify murderers, people that murdered people in Bocha. Putin is now being glorified by an American president that doesn't know his right from his left. And that's the sad reality, just like I predicted. And you can see the exit note from the meetings. Like I predicted rightly, Putin's one main agenda is to collect Donbass and Luhansk, expansion. And he wants it. And that was what he said in the meeting. And that's what Trump now wants to discuss with Euro and Ukraine, Zelensky, that cede more land. Cede more land to who? And it's not today that contention has been there. In fact, Kuchma, the former president of Ukraine, did write a book saying Ukraine is not Russia, where he addressed most of the sentiment. And you know why Putin is doing this? And it's shocking for me that all the world leaders like Trump are leading him on and they think he wants peace. It's because he doesn't have foothold in Ukrainian power politics any longer. The only person he had was Viktor Yanukovych. When Yanukovych was defeated in the election by Yushchenko, he did bid his time. In fact, he employed Trump ally Paul Manafort to come and coach Yanukovych. And they prepared him for the 2010 elections. When he did win the elections, everything was rosy. In fact, Yanukovych increased his lease on Crimea. And Putin was okay because he had powers. People that were in power were his puppets. When Euromaidan happened in 2014, why was it that year that Putin decided to invade Ukraine? Why didn't he invade Ukraine when Yanukovych was there? He will not, because his puppet was in power. All of this is about control for him. It was because Euromaidan happened and his own puppet left, Yanukovych, that's why he invaded Ukraine and he's been collecting land since then. So because if he cannot install a political puppet for himself, what will he do? Violence and force. And it's this same man, Trump very delusionally thinks will want to make peace. Like I predicted, we should brace up for a long-time war because Zelensky will not want to cede ground. The Euro, too, should learn to stand by him because America can be trusted. Sad reality.
Disappointing was a word that was used following the meeting last week, Friday. Trump had gone into that meeting, two things he had said, either there's a ceasefire or heavy sanctions for Russia. Neither of that happened. And in analyzing who came out the winner between Putin or who came out victorious, as it were, between Putin and Trump, people said perhaps Putin even had the upper hand because Trump came out without, anything concrete for that particular meeting. If anything, it was more a leaning again towards Russia. And, whilst just looking at the news and trying to analyze and look at it, I'm trying to get into Trump's headspace as the president of America and his relationship with Russia and his foreign policy as it has to do with Russia. I'm trying to understand why the soft pedaling, why this almost courting of Putin, why this, willing to trade or, Zelensky and Ukraine in favor of Putin, despite European leaders talking about how they're going to continue to stand by Ukraine and moving away very sharply from his predecessors in terms of their relationship with Russia. It's interesting, and I would like to understand what his end game would be. I'm sure we'll continue to watch. But with regards to the war and how long this war would last, I'd like to link it to the Israeli story you brought on, and that is now the people's perception, the real casualties of war. When it comes to Ukraine and whether or not Zelensky is going to cede, whether or not he's going to agree to giving even more land occupation to Russia, we can see a bit of discontent, especially civilians who are saying that are the lives that are being lost daily in Ukraine worth his stand or not giving land to Putin and to Russia. Of course, he said, never, it's not going to happen. 2014 was just him trying to do even more. But then when the people when there's a discontent with the people because lives are being lost and doesn't look like there's any headway, no one wants to give, everyone is holding on to their guns, it is difficult, increasingly difficult for him to take his stance. People have said, analysts have said, today's meeting in Washington with the other leaders in Europe who have said they should not be left out when it comes to talks about Russia and Ukraine, it might be even more important and strategic based on the future of Ukraine and the war between Russia and Ukraine after today's meeting. So I'll be waiting for what the outcome would be if Trump would move position, if he will continue to put pressure on Zelensky to give Russia what he wants, or if he would actually be able to face Russia and effect the sanctions he had promised that he was going to do.
Thank you.
Okay, you recall that ahead of the meeting at the Anchorage in Alaska last Friday, Catherine Leavitt, speaking for the White House, I tried to walk back, the importance of the event, saying that, look, this was just a fact-finding exercise for President Trump in order to minimize our expectations. But in any case, the meeting took place for 3 hours, and at the end of the meeting, President Putin walked away and was even escorted out of American airspace. The first time he will be visiting the U.S. in 10 years. And when he got back home, there was jubilation with Dmitry Medvedev, even jubilating that Russia has been able to assert itself at that international meeting. How did Russia assert itself? What he walked away with was the insistence that he must be allowed to hold on to Luhansk and Donetsk and parts of the whole of eastern Ukraine, and that he will freeze operations in the southern region of Zaporizhzhia and the whole of that region. He will stop the advancement. Yeah. But of course, the objective of the meeting was not met. However, what also came out of that meeting was President Trump now shifting the onus for peace on Zelensky. And he even wrote on Truth Social that, Zelensky should be prepared to give up Donbass, and that, if he wants to allow peace, he should allow, and if he wants to continue fighting, he should continue fighting. So that's the background. And he then also said, peace agreement instead of ceasefire agreement. That it's better to just move on to peace agreement. What is peace agreement? How is it different from ceasefire agreement? When the two gladiators in this matter are insisting on the same things, Zelensky has made it very clear that to cede any part of Ukrainian territory will amount to a violation of the Ukrainian constitution.
Yes.
Russia is saying Ukraine must demilitarize, must stop its ambition of joining NATO, and there must be international recognition for the parts of Ukraine that Russia has seized. So there is a stalemate, and which is why it's surprising that Steve Witkoff now comes forward to say, Putin agreed to Article 5 in favor of Ukraine. Article 5 of the NATO agreement simply says if a member is attacked, other allies should go and support that.
War against one,
but that's not definite. What Witkoff is saying is not what Marco Rubio is saying. Marco Rubio says it is still a long way off. And we will know that today when there's that meeting in Washington, D.C., first with Zelensky, and then Zelensky along with selected European leaders. It's not every European leader that is going to be there. But so far, we have seen the effect in the markets. The markets in Asia Pacific, they seem to have done well this morning, as everybody is waiting for the outcome of the further negotiations today. Oil is bearish. Oil is bearish because President Trump has now said, sanctions on Russian oil and secondary sanctions on China, India, and others who buy oil from Russia have been kept on hold for now. So because of that, Russian oil will continue to flow.
Wow. So
at the end of the day, what you see is that perhaps the U.S. was not prepared. Putin has the upper hand. Very quickly to Israel. The hostages that were taken on October 7, 2023, there were 253 in number. As at this moment, due to negotiations, interventions, and all of that, there are still 20 Israeli hostages in the hands of the Hamas. But affected families have been saying, get our children released. You'll recall that about 2 weeks ago, images of 2 Israeli hostages were shown in very dire straits, in very appalling conditions. And now you have about 500,000 people in Tel Aviv coming out, and then hundreds of thousands also coming out across Israel, asking for the release of these hostages. But of course, characteristically, Netanyahu says, you are trying to harden, Hamas. But we must continue to ask for peace, call for peace, be it in Israel and Gaza or between Ukraine and Russia. Because at the end of the day, it's global peace, global trade, supply chains that are threatened.
Absolutely.
And more importantly, humanity, because of the high humanitarian incidents involved in all of these conflicts.
Agreed. Peace in the world is what we all need. Thank you all for your wonderful submission. Thank you again, Ayo. Glad to have you back. Let's take a look at papers this morning. This day leads with the APC sweeping 12 of the 16 constituencies, followed by APGA with 2, and the PDP and the NNPP each with 1 constituency each. Expectedly, the presidency has hailed the victory, calling it an endorsement of President Tinubu, who commended INEC for a hitch-free vote. However, the Labour Party say the vote is a mockery of democracy, while the PDP chief described the vote as a fraud. Now, this day's picture headline shows a star-studded stretch of faces present at Zenith Bank's 35th anniversary celebration over the weekend, which does include our very own Prince Nduka Obaigben in the blue, I believe. That's him at the very, very end. Now, the results of the by-elections find themselves across many of Nigerian dailies today, including the leadership, which says that there's been mixed reactions in the wake of the APC's dominance. So does the Daily Trust and the Vanguard. So the Vanguard's write-up reveals how the APC swept the by-elections. We'll take a look at some other newspaper lines out this morning, so we're not hammering on this by-election issue. Let's take a look at the New Telegraph. The New Telegraph leads with a new revenue formula that will replace the existing revenue template, which dictates how federation revenues are shared. It's being revisited by the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Commissions team now, 3 years after they had initially presented that framework. The Punch stays with this looming threat of strikes over workers' compensation. Now, the federal government backtracks as the NLC holds ground. That's their headline. But we do know that the federal government has pledged to reverse deductions from the employees' compensation scheme managed by the Nigerian Social Insurance Trust Fund to ease tensions with the NLC, the Nigeria Labour Congress, following the threat of nationwide strike by the union. The Guardian leads with over 10 banks and insurers are at risk of so-called forced mergers in the face the race, of this new capital by 2026. The Daily Independent reports on SERAP, that's the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, calling on the Senate President Godswill Akpabio and House of Representatives Speaker Tajuddin Abbas to refer allegations that lawmakers pay up to 3 million naira to present bills, motions and petitions at plenary to anti-graft agencies such as the EFCC for investigation. This is happening following a member of the House of Representatives, Ibrahim Ayo, who is representing Jigawa for the APC, alleging that lawmakers pay between 1 million naira and 3 million naira to present bills, motions and petitions at the National Assembly. Lastly, very quickly to the UK's Daily Express, it does leave with 10 million people in the United Kingdom being addicted to junk food, and because of that, experts are calling on the World Health Organization to include food addiction as a form of substance abuse, in the same way the WHO recognizes hard drugs as substance abuse.
It's actually substance abuse, food addiction.
Do you think?
Yes.
In the same way?
Yes, because when you eat junk food, you get your sugar rush, and it does something to your brain. So it's actually substance abuse, and we must look at it. 2 points I quickly want to make about Ukraine is this. You see, the idea that NATO in their delusional mind thinks that, they will have to have they will be able to do a coalition of the willing to be able to protect Ukraine. It's not going to be possible. They need to fight it out now, once and for all. You know why? There's something called the Budapest Memorandum, Femi. Check it out. The same Russia invading Ukraine land today, after Ukraine agreed to give up their nuclear weapons in 1904, they signed a Budapest Memorandum that states that Russia was going to protect Ukraine. But they have violated that memorandum. In fact, they've said it's not justiciable today. And secondly, for Trump's tweets, where he said, Obama took Crimea, they took Crimea, Obama didn't give a shot. Is it not the taking of Crimea that Obama didn't do anything about that emboldened Putin to start doing all this he's doing today?
All right, let me talk about food substance abuse. And I talk about this because Britain is posed, according to the reports, to be the fattest country in Europe in a few months. And they've actually likened some of the characteristics of substance abuse with food abuse. Cravings, inability to stop eating it even though you know it's bad for your body. When you're trying to withdraw, you have withdrawal symptoms when you don't have it. And the biggest culprits have been said to be pizza, chocolate, crisps, and biscuits and ice cream. So these unhealthy Britain. But I think what is fundamental about it is that it costs Britain £58 billion and upwards of it to tackle this issue. That's why it's become a problem. And that's why when we look at health challenges or even what is supposed to be lifestyle habits, it's not just because they're trying to be big brother over what people eat. It's because it's actually costing an already overstretched NHS even more money in trying to deal with the issues or the after effects of junk food.
Thank you.
Well, we can't finish talking about the by-elections, in which the APC head on to 12 of the 16 constituencies. PDP, ABGA got 2, PDP 1, NMPP also got 1. Now, what does this say about the future? One newspaper reported that political parties head on to their strongholds, which means that ahead of 2027, we are already seeing intimations of the kind of desperation, of the kind of competition that will occur when we get to 2027. Now, what lessons can be learned from this process? They articulated that earlier on to say that nothing has changed. Plus ça a changé, c'est la même chose. Vote buying, manipulation, ballot snatching, whatever. The federal government, you quoted federal government say hitch free. I thought I heard them saying violence free. It is not hitch free.
Okay.
Ballot
That's what
papers
the state
arrived
said.
late. Beavers did not work in Edo. Money was seized somewhere very close to Rufai's village in Ogun State. A sum of about 2.5 million naira.
Yes.
Odogbolu is not far from Iperu Remo.
Yes.
You know.
Yes,
So you have these patterns being reproduced. And I said that what is important, to repeat it, is the imperative of electoral reform, particularly the section dealing with electoral offenders. These electoral offenders get away with their impunity because they are not punished.
That's not right.
Well, thank you so much,
Always a
Adefemi.
pleasure.
Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Ayo.